UGA legend, college football legend Stetson Bennett. If you're not familiar with the story, you're about to get a lot of the inside scoop here. Stetson Bennett has finally kind of come out and given his point of view on what it was like to earn the starting job at Georgia. He's talked about some details that I didn't know about as an insider. I want to give the inside perspective and kind of the fan perspective along the lines of the timeline. I've got a lot of notes. I've got a lot of the quotes that he actually said in an interview with TJ Calloway of Onward Reserve recently, where they sat down and talked about this. I've got all the details for you. This is a really interesting story starting back in 2017 when he first got there as a walk-on. So you're about to get the Stetson Bennett story and probably some details you didn't know about if you already knew this thing. Ryan Clay from Dawg Post talking about Stetson Bennett and the Georgia Bulldogs, his journey, some quotes from Monken. Let's get into this thing. Newsletters down below. I don't want to waste any more time. I want to start talking about this because this one was interesting. So he talks about 2017, why he actually went to Georgia. Obviously, grew up a Georgia fan. There's the love of the Dogs and that portion of it. They give him a walk-on offer. Stetson's a really good Georgia high school quarterback. I can't remember the exact county, but down in South Georgia, right? South of Atlanta and all that. He's on the Georgia record books, too, if you go and look at it. So instead of going to a smaller school like he could have and probably will start immediately somewhere, he picks Georgia and he says, in quotes, "If someone is better than me, I want to find out what it looks like." All right, so he gets to Georgia, and there's Jacob Eason there, and there's Jake Fromm there. Jake Fromm ends up being the starter in 2017, and Stetson's just a walk-on wearing number 22 down the depth chart. So in the spring of 2018 comes, and I got quotes written down from Stetson. I'll tell you when it's actually a quote, and I'll throw up air quotes when we get there. So Justin Fields gets there. He's an early enrollee in 2018 for the 2018 high school class. Obviously, he was a top 2 guy, him and Trevor Lawrence, both from Georgia as well, but top 2 nationally as football prospects. So 2018 rolls around. It's spring practice. Stetson hasn't quite left yet, and this is what he said. "They told me they were going to give me a shot to battle for the second string job with Justin Fields, but I just never got a shot. I just knew after spring it wasn't going to be me." So at this point, Stetson's kind of the third string entering that because Jacob Eason is on his way out the door. So he goes to Jones County. He goes to JUCO. And then he has a good season in 2018. Then he gets to 2019. And he's gonna move on again. That's kind of the point of going down to JUCO is moving on and getting an opportunity to go to another big school. 2019 rolls around. He's getting calls from Georgia after he decides he's gonna go to a school in Louisiana Lafayette. Todd Monken, Kirby, they're calling him. "Hey, we want you to come and compete for this backup job. You got to make a decision now." Stetson talks about how that day he told him at first, "Hey, I can't make a decision right now." But ultimately, he decides to go back to Georgia. And he said, knowing that he's going to go there, he's probably not going to leave again. Right? So he's the backup quarterback to Jake Fromm. He gets some reps. I remember I was a student at the time. I remember not 100% knowing who Stetson Bennett was. Seeing him out there in garbage time in 2019. Right? So he's the backup quarterback. Then you move into 2020. Well, Jake Fromm's gone. What's the Georgia quarterback situation? It's all over the place. Carson Beck comes in as a freshman, as a top 10 quarterback recruit, top 10 or 15 quarterback recruit in the 2020 class. Jamie Newman is transferring from Wake Forest, seen as one of the better quarterbacks in college football and one of the best transfer guys. JT Daniels, same thing, 5-star. Georgia goes out and gets a couple of transfer quarterbacks, in addition to having a homegrown talent in DeJuan Mathis, a really raw talent that they were excited about, a freshman in Carson Beck, and then Stetson Bennett, the guy that has been in your program for 2 seasons now and 3 years. He's kind of the one that's just getting forgotten about, and that's where we get to right before fall camp in 2020, the COVID season. It's supposed to be Jamie Newman. JT Daniels is not cleared, so he can't really compete for the job. So it's looking like Jamie Newman's going to be the starting quarterback. And they tell Stetson. Stetson says that this is what Todd Monken told him. "Hey, we've got 5 quarterbacks. We can't rep 5. We're not going to rep you." Stetson says that's what they told him heading into 2020. Telling him, "Look, you're not going to be the guy. We're not even going to rep you because 5 is too many." Well, Jamie Newman leaves. He decides that COVID's not worth the risk. Whatever it was that Jamie Newman's decision was, he was just not going to stick around, and it ended up not working out for Jamie Newman probably the way that he thought it was going to, but that's a whole nother story for another day. JT's still not ready, right? JT Daniels is not cleared. He was dealing with a knee injury, I believe, from the season before at USC, right? He ends up having more injuries, and we'll get to that point too, at Georgia. And so they think Carson Beck's a little bit too young. So what ends up being the depth chart heading into the first game of the year, the Arkansas game, a delayed start. I believe it was on September 27th. 2020 was the first game of the year for Georgia, if my memory, look that up, if my memory serves me correctly. The depth chart ends up being D'Wan Mathis QB1, Stetson Bennett QB2, Carson Beck QB3, right? So that's your depth chart heading into that Arkansas game. D'Wan Mathis didn't look good, right? Maybe he was a little bit too raw, and Stetson Bennett ends up coming in, making some plays, and helping Georgia beat Arkansas in that opening game of the COVID season, right? He ends up starting more games that year, kind of up and down, did not play well against Florida. You want to hear how well he didn't play, and he knows he didn't play that well? I was in a room full of people, big Georgia fans, big room of Georgia fans. They were cheering when Stetson was heading to the locker room in Jacksonville. That's how much people didn't want Stetson Bennett out there. And this is before the real drama with Stetson Bennett, where it was like, hey, dude, there's this half of Georgia fans that don't like him. There's this half that do like him. Well, before that, it was like that. People were cheering that he was getting hurt. It was awful. It was an awful thing, right? I don't attest to that. JT Daniels eventually gets cleared, plays pretty well, throws for 400-plus yards in the Mississippi State against Mississippi State in 2020. That was his Georgia debut. Number like that hadn't happened before, and people don't really throw for 400 yards as a Georgia quarterback. It just doesn't really happen. So JT doing that brought a lot of excitement. This guy's a former 5-star, right? Well, then fast forward to 2021. You head into the offseason, and Stetson's still around, but it's going to be JT. Jamie Newman's gone. D'Wan Mathis is gone. So you got JT, you got Stetson, and you got Carson Beck, who is now a sophomore. Here's a quote from Stetson Bennett. In the offseason, I think it will be me and Carson competing for the backup job. And then when they get to the spring, Stetson says that Todd Monken goes, hey, Carson's the backup. So Stetson talks about how he almost left that summer in 2021 because in spring Carson plays well. He's going to be the backup to JT, and that Stetson Bennett's going to be the QB3 and not even the QB2 of that 2021 Georgia football team. He felt, and who knows, this is Stetson Bennett's point of view, but he felt that he didn't even get a fair chance to compete that spring. Then it gets to the season, right? The Clemson game happens. Georgia wins 10-3. Weird game. Great defense that game, not good offense, right? The only score of the entire game, the only touchdown, was a Christopher Smith pick six that ultimately helped Georgia win that game. Otherwise, it would have been tied at 3-3. Well, I don't remember, but I don't think JT Daniels threw for more than 150 yards, and I know that the leading receiver was Brock Bowers with like 46 yards. I don't have any numbers pulled up in front of me. You'd fact check me. Something was weird with Georgia's offense at Clemson, right? That's what the insider perspective was. What the fan perspective was, hey, this Clemson defense is really good, but what's wrong with the Georgia offense? Well, we find out JT Daniels is dealing with a lat injury. He's dealing with back injury. Maybe that's part of why the offense looked stale and they didn't push the ball downfield against Clemson in that opening game. So they play UAB the next week. JT's not going to play. Carson Beck was the backup in spring. He was the QB2. This was official, right? Kirby literally said, this is how things work. Monday, there's a press conference of game weeks. Monday, there's a press conference. Tuesday, there's a press conference. Those are the only days you get to talk to Kirby throughout the week, outside of some other stuff, but official in-person press conferences for the Georgia media. Talked about how Carson Beck was, there wasn't really a lot about JT and his injury at that time, and they had reiterated that Carson Beck was the QB2. So Stetson Bennett, big-time afterthought, heading into this UAB game. And there are rumors Thursday night, Friday. People are calling around. People are calling Carson Beck's family. And they're excited that Carson Beck's going to get this opportunity to play. Like, that's how much that everyone thought that it was going to be Carson. Well, guess what? Stetson Bennett beats him out during practice. This is what he said. They let me and Carson compete during the week. But I was thinking I've got nothing else to lose, so we're just going to go out there. And then he beat Carson out against UAB. He goes in and throws for 5 touchdowns. So that was that, right? It was ridiculous. Deep shot to Jermaine Burton. Deep shot to Arian Smith. Deep shot to Brock Bowers. I mean, he was just bombing in touchdowns. Well, that was week 2. What's week 3? South Carolina's on the docket. JT Daniels gets cleared again. Well, guess what? This is a part that we didn't know about as insiders. The assumption was just that JT's the starting quarterback, even though Stetson Bennett just did that. And this was how all the fans felt too. And this is the difference. This is one of the details of the story I really didn't know about. Because we thought that, okay, well, once JT gets back, it'll just be his job. No question, right? Even whatever. Stetson just threw 5 touchdowns. He's a former walk-on, all this kind of good stuff. Well, apparently, it was a competition that week, and JT beats him out. But the plan was, and you saw this plan take place, because we'll get to that, but the plan was JT 2 drives, Stetson 2 drives. They were going to go back and forth. They were going to go to the 2-quarterback thing. And if you guys know me, you know I don't like the 2-quarterback thing. It doesn't work. Well, they were going to try that against South Carolina. So this is Stetson's point of view, and this is actually what happened. JT goes out, and Georgia flies down the field. They score 2 touchdowns. And Stetson, he says that he's just sitting on the sideline thinking, oh, man, how do I follow that up? Well, that's going to be tough. Stetson does go into the game. People are a little bit confused when that happens. I remember being a little bit confused. There wasn't a lot about that. We didn't know that was going to necessarily happen. We knew there was a chance he'd get in, but not so early in the game where they'd only scored 14 or 17 points at the time, Georgia. Well, guess what? He goes in, and his first pass was an interception. And that was that, right? He didn't get the playing time I think they originally planned for. It was bad. And then, right, Georgia blew out South Carolina, right? They scored 40. South Carolina, I think they scored 13, something like that. 40-13 was around the score of that game. Georgia blows them out. James Cook has a really good game. Jermaine Burton, A.D. Mitchell catch deep balls from JT Daniels. And Georgia moves forward. And they go up to Vanderbilt. And they beat the crap out of Vanderbilt. It was like 62-0 or 60-0. It was an absolute beatdown. JT Daniels balls out in the first quarter, and he's dealing with injuries, obviously. Stetson, this is what he said. Stetson said that JT took himself out in the first quarter of Vanderbilt, and they didn't think that Kirby liked that. And Stetson was the starter the rest of the year, right? JT obviously dealing with some injuries, and there was the oblique thing, the lat thing. But Stetson said that was kind of the moment that he was the starting quarterback for the rest of the year, and he was. And there was a lot of criticism, and there was a lot of drama. I remember talking about it in the ESPN documentary they got me in, and that's all they asked me about. They didn't ask me any questions about anything else about that season other than the Stetson football drama. Because guess what? Stetson Bennett was the story. I think that his perspective of this story is interesting. There are details that I wasn't sure about, but that is Stetson Bennett's point of view of the starting football job at Georgia and how he got there, how we got to that point. Not surprising. I think that I'm gonna believe most of this. It sounds about what was going on. The things that I didn't know about JT checking himself out. I knew about some of the conversations behind the scene. I knew that Monken told Stetson that it wasn't going to happen, but you didn't know what they were saying and when they were saying it. And I just think, hell of a story. You don't find a lot of college football stories like this. It was awesome to cover it. It was awesome to be up close to it. But the Georgia Bulldogs, they've got a gem of a story. Don't be surprised if there's a movie about all this one day. All right? Newsletter, link is down below. That's the Stetson Bennett story. Thanks for watching.